The United States of Donald Trump. Yeah. What's up, everyone? Wanted to make a video about, I guess, the kind of goings on now that Trump is president, and kind of just give my take about what I think should happen, the direction that I would like to see the left take. And, I have to say the left because the Democrats are just not cutting it. they they made some poor decisions. I mean, and especially recently. For example, like because people are like, "Oh, Obama's great, 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 great," and I like Obama. I think Obama's done a lot of good stuff. But look, he did the National Defense Authorization Act. I believe that's what it's called. But if you just look up Obama Ministry of Propaganda, excuse me, you'll see that we're trying to just like essentially criticize people that are critical of the U.S. government. That's what we're going to be putting our resources towards now. And I have a problem with that. I have a huge problem with that because the whole point of the press is that you got to be critical of the government, and if you don't have that, and this is like they frame it as propaganda, as if like it just can't be true. The U.S. is like a source of good for everyone ever. That's like the sense that I was even just getting watching the inauguration. Like, we're God's country. And even disputing that claim on its face, people will be like, oh, what are you talking about? God bless America. I have no room for you anymore. I'm sorry, in my life. If that's just like the extent of your thinking, like actually look at the history of what our country has done and what we're responsible for, and then come back and talk to me and tell me if we're God's country. So, just to get that little rant out of the way, warm me up. Uh, what I wanted to touch on first is the Women's March that just happened recently, the day after the inauguration. And I looked and I saw on social media all the signs, all the great things that were going on, and I liked the overall messaging of what was going on. I can tell you, like, I agreed with some signs more than others, certain messages over others. But yeah, overall, I think it was a good, like, thing that they had there. I didn't hear of any violent stories coming out of that, so it seems all good to me. I mean, I'm all for the right to just peacefully protest. That's fine, but my problem comes from when these kind of things happen and then they die out, and they die out because they're not actually taking action. They're just showing their disdain and dissent for the government. And I think to some degree, yes, that's a good thing. You got to show people that you're upset, and sometimes actually, if you get enough people to be on your side, then people will actually kind of cave. The people in the government will cave. But I read an article from The Guardian saying how like this is kind of doomed to be like Occupy Democrats. I kind of agree with that point to some degree, but I mean, there could be more things to come from this. I mean, it's still extremely early in the Trump presidency. I mean, we'll see how the left will organize, if at all. And I mean, that's what we need. We can't just have people out there saying that they're upset and there's no actual calls to action anymore. It's just armchair activism, as I've kind of touched upon in previous videos. It's not just enough anymore to say you're upset. That's like the main kind of message I have there. I mean, we kind of see this as like a new civil rights era, I think, to some degree. Like they even call it the March on Washington, Women's March on Washington. But I'm a little bit more hesitant, actually. Not to say that it's wrong what's going on. Like I just said, I really actually kind of agree with the messaging overall. But at the same time, there was specific goals with the civil rights. Black people couldn't vote because they couldn't register because people were just basically being bigots towards them. They were giving these bullshit, literacy tests, and their rights were really being taken away from them. And this is kind of rising out of fear that people's rights are going to be taken away. It's a more defensive kind of thing. But I think at the end of the day, we have to kind of step back and wait and see what's going to happen. I mean, it seems very reactionary what's going on. We're very upset that these people are in power. Sure, I'm just as upset as anyone, but we have to actually be principled, I think, and wait for things to pan out. Again, I just want to emphasize again, like, it's fine to peacefully protest, but my problem comes from when that's like the end all be all. Like, it's getting to the point where I don't know if you can really say you're politically active if you're just out there with your sign walking around. And you know what, to be honest, it's like I wish that would suffice, but ultimately, like, the people in government are not going to be sympathetic to that. I think that's what's going on, is that there's a disillusionment. There's we're in our bubbles, and the people in government in power, they're not going to care. And certainly not people in Trump's administration. So that's kind of the funny thing to me. It's like you're trying to be really vocal now. Well, where was your voice, during Obama's years and all the horrible things that he's done? He's done great things too. I don't want to take that away from him, but the drone policy, Guantanamo Bay, like, where was your voice then? These were just small factions at that time. So, at its worst, I will say that it's basically just identity politics. All it is like we're dividing ourselves into these groups, and they're the oppressed, basically. You have women, gay, African American. I mean, all these groups, and yes, they're horribly oppressed in a lot of ways and systematically, but what I think is happening is the Democrats kind of use these issues to their advantage. I mean, and even with Hillary Clinton, that's just kind of like what was going on, at least from what I could see. I mean, she was not even in favor of gay marriage until a couple of years ago. And I think people bring up the point how that was the way public opinion was until just recently. Now people are in favor, but you gotta have principles. I think you gotta have an actually firm ideology, and the reason why is because people will believe you more. If you're just like kind of like following the political winds wherever they may go, then you don't come off as a genuine person. You don't come off as someone that people can trust, and it's a problem. It's when people are going to use these issues basically just to pander to people. And what Trump even said in his inauguration speech about politics with politicians with all talk and no action, I think that is kind of true in what's going on. I think Trump is going to fall victim to that too. He's like the snake oil candidate of change. He's not going to really bring change because, look at his cabinet. As I've talked about many times, it's full of corrupt, incompetent fools. But he had the right messaging, and that's why people gravitated to it. And look, that's why the Democrats, they need to have a solid message. They have to, present themselves in a way that if it's like a unifying message, that's great, but you have to really follow through. Or even if, like, because I understand people, they may not succeed at all their goals, like when they get into office. That's, of course, a possibility. But have an actual policy plan and have something that people are going to really take to. Whereas with Hillary, yeah, I'm going to try not to harp on Hillary too much anymore because it's kind of like old news at this point. But just to say, like, it wasn't really a vision of the country. It was just incremental change that she was offering. People weren't buying that. People that were struggling, they look to Trump because he actually was a little bit more imaginative, or at least presented himself that way. So that's what it comes down to me. Um, and look, like conservatives, they have more organization in a sense because in government they're definitely hypocrites and they'll sell out at any turn and all these things, but their message is certainly more concrete. It's like it's just traditional values and small government, and there needs to be an antithesis to that on the left. There has to be, I think, a universal leftist ideology. It sounds kind of weird to think about to me, to just have like, okay, this is what liberalism, this is what leftism means. Like putting it in blunt terms like that, maybe I'm not in favor of quite that, but we have to go in that direction. We have to have a more unified Democratic Party, and despite what some people might tell you, in the Democratic Party, it's not unified. People on the left, it's so varied. That's really the problem. There's all these radically different configurations on the left, and they weren't able to rein them all in. They couldn't get all the votes they needed, obviously, to get the presidency. So I think a big reason why this is why this is the way it is because of corporate influence. It kind of muddies the waters of what's going on, makes it so that people are operating not on principle. They're not operating based on their constituency, what the people really want. They're just going based on what the government. I'm sorry, what the lobbyists are getting these politicians to do. This is just how things work. You have lobbyists that work for companies, and they try and get legislation through that is going to benefit them, or at least not hinder them in any way. And then you have a system of corruption and cronyism. Just to point to one example, Cory Booker. And I know a lot of people want to stand up and defend him, but I've really kind of looked at this in as many ways as I can, and I don't see how you can defend Cory Booker. I'm sorry. With the pharma bill, I don't know the name of it, but Bernie Sanders was the one backing it. It was his bill, and what it said was we can import drugs for cheaper. For the people can buy it for cheaper from Canada if it's imported, and that's good for everyone. You get the same drugs, the same exact drugs that we would have now, except they're cheaper. And the biggest, or I should say, like the most substantive argument against voting in favor of this is Trump's FDA, and we can't trust their standards. Excuse me. So we can't trust the FDA standards because of Trump. First of all, this seems very similar to the kind of thinking that the Republicans had under Obama. It's like, oh, well, if Obama's doing it, that's bad. It's just bad, flat. Well, I think you're not really being consistent then, are you? And furthermore, we're going to have Trump's FDA no matter what's going to happen. This is a reality now. So it just doesn't make sense to me. Like you're going to say, like, okay, we have to have Trump's FDA, but we're going to have the same price, the more expensive drugs, or the more expensive prices to pay. No, I can't sympathize with that because it's, I don't know where it really stems from. And look, the overwhelming majority of Democrats voted in favor of this. It was only 13, including Cory Booker, who voted against it. And it's a problem. It's clear that all these people had a lot of backing from Big Pharma. Cory Booker is one of the biggest receivers of this. And got to point it out for what it is. It's just corruption. That's what it is. You have to get money out of politics. We have to have clean, fair elections. Yeah, I'm in favor of getting people more politically involved, and in some ways, actually, kind of by force from the government. And you can do it, I think, in ways that is not violent. You don't have to put someone in jail. Maybe you pay a fine. I don't know. So that's my take. And I mean, like with issues of class, that's where it's really important. That's why I think We have to get people more educated and get them more active. Issues of class are the most kind of overarching for people. I mean, racism is obviously a problem still. Discrimination of all kinds. If you're a part of the LGBT community, if you're a Muslim, I mean, you face discrimination. That's awful. But we have to look at things a little bit more broadly and more unifying. And class, I think, is what's going to ultimately win out. It's going to bring people together with, someone like Bernie's message about basically the elite class need to be taxed properly. They aren't. They've had lower taxes in comparison to what we've had under past presidents. Just under Eisenhower, he taxed the rich at a 90% marginal rate. And what's wrong with that? I mean, like they should pay their fair share. I'm not necessarily. I wouldn't go as far as to say like 90% marginal rate is what I'm in favor for. But maybe it's 50%, 55%, I don't know. I think that's more reasonable because you're asking them to contribute to society in a way that's going to be more useful. I think it will be more useful, however, the most useful it can be if money is taken out of politics. That's a problem that I think has to be addressed, is that, corruption is kind of like the key thing here. It's kind of why I think people are hesitant to put their faith in the government. But it gives government a bad name at the end of the day. I think the corporate Democrat wing, they do a lot of damage by selling out like this. They just give a bad name to government because of the fact that they are so influenced by corporate money. So, what is the real solution to what's going on right now? Well, I mean, it's a little bit unclear. We have to wait and kind of see what's going to really take place under a Trump presidency. But there are some basic things that, are just elementary things that you're going to have to do. So what is the real solution again? It's getting politically active by getting in contact with your local politicians. Just call as many people as you can. Try and visit them in person if possible. Volunteer wherever you can. I know I'm thinking about doing that. I'm a college student, and I also work at an internship 3 days a week. So I understand how it can be so hard for people to fit these things in. And, if you're working, sometimes if you work 2 jobs or whatever, how is everyone going to have the time to really go out and volunteer for these political causes? Kind of like why I was saying earlier how I wish going out where you're signed would be enough. But the reason why it's not is because of the corrupting money in politics. It just basically makes it so that it doesn't matter public opinion really anymore. It's not really a matter of that. It's a matter of where the corporate money is coming from and who it's going to. So that's why I think if you're on the battleground and actually trying to push political change yourself, that's going to be much more effective than just putting your dissent out there for people to see. Enough of this establishment politics. I mean, we have to stop playing apologetics for someone like Hillary Clinton. Again, not trying to harp on her too much, but we need someone more principled. I'm sorry. We can't just keep playing the same old game and not trying to change our ways so much. No, the real liberal base of America wants progressive change. They agree with Bernie Sanders, all of his different positions by and large. So if you're not going to have a candidate that's truly revolutionary, not go out pitchforks in the street and hurt people and cause vandalism, revolutionary, but you have to be imaginative in your ideas and dream big. I think that's incredibly important. Educate yourself, and support independent media. That's a important part because you have to have a real kind of like basis in the facts and make sure that you're just trying to investigate everything. I mean, I think the best thing to do is to really be skeptical of all the information you hear and try and double, triple check everything. Um, and even though I think it's important to consume kind of all the media that is out there, like even watching something like Fox News is helpful in the sense that you get a feel for the narrative that's being spun by people. I mean, obviously, because they have biases, a right wing bias that's so they wear it on their sleeves, even though they try to be like the fair and balanced network. Where yeah, right. Well, it's important to kind of get the different voices, in my opinion. Not, and of course, yeah, like I was saying, be skeptical, but just kind of like know what's being said on both sides. Um, you're going to be more savvy that way, I think, is what I'm getting at. Um, then, most importantly, you just got to go out and vote. Um, and the midterm elections are just as important, too. We have to make sure that we're getting actual representation in Congress. Um, like, our. It's just frustrating me, I'm sorry, just thinking about all the reasons why this country is lacking in so many ways. But we just have such horrible turnout rates in this country for voting compared to other countries. And midterm elections are even worse than in general elections. So we have to really be more active. And voting is kind of like your key political action that you can take. It's supposed to be one of the most sacred rights that you can have. If I mean sacred, given to you by God. It's not quite the adjective that I would choose, but regardless, yeah, it's a very important right. And to not utilize it is just an admission of defeat in my opinion. And it's like you just don't care what direction the country goes in, and you may not, yeah, can't talk today. You may not genuinely care the direction of the country. You might think it's not of any consequence to you, but look, I mean, when Obamacare is either gutted or repealed, which I'm sure it will be, people are gonna not have health insurance. I mean, like this idea of like replacing it immediately after it's repealed is not a reality. It doesn't happen that way. So, yep, that's all I pretty much had to say. I mean, try and get as politically active as you can. I just want to name drop some alternative media outlets that I think are very good and are worth checking out. If you're not familiar, maybe you're only kind of familiar with watching stuff on CNN or something like that. I go to the Young Turks occasionally. Excuse me. I'm a little weary of them sometimes. Like I'm not totally down with everything they say, but I think by and large they're pretty good. And then I like a lot of their offshoot channels, like Secular Talk with Kyle Kalinske. He's great. I like the Majority Report with Sam Cedar. The Jimmy Dore Show is another one that I kind of like, and David Pakman Show. I've watched that more in the past, but I think it's still good overall. Um, Ring of Fire, that includes Sam Cedar, Mike Papatano, Tom Hartman. His show is also good too. RT, Democracy Now!, which includes I can't remember her name now. The lady who hosts that, I can't remember her name, but it's good TV. I think it is on TV and online. Oh, excuse me, and they do investigative reporting like and articles. Intercept is great too. They're uh, connected to Edward Snowden to some degree, and Glenn Greenwald works for them. So those are just some names off the top of my head that I think are great people for alternative media sources. Yep, so signing out now. Try and keep hopeful about what's going on. And, if you're going to complain, then put your words where your actions should be. I think if you're going to really be that upset, and you're going to like travel however many miles to Washington, D.C. to make your voice heard, then actually show something for it instead of just like a picture of yourself on social media and act like that's the best thing possible. I think the best thing possible should be, and hopefully will be, true political action by getting involved in as many ways as you can, even running for office. I think is something that people should consider as well.